telescope. Again, it'll be 2 active latches, 1 passive latch. There'll be a ground strap and 4 electrical connectors in order to mate it up fully to the telescope. Again, the mass of the COS instrument is around 880 pounds. The COSTAR will then have to be retrieved from its stowage location, placed into the ASIPE enclosure, and the lid will be closed and everything will be safe then for landing. At this point, the ACS part of the task begins. That's the scientific instrument that you see flashing on the right. ACS is the Advanced Camera for Surveys, and this instrument was installed during the last servicing mission. The work site is in the upper right-hand corner of the instrument, and the crew will begin by installing a foot restraint, and then John will ingress that foot restraint to access the work site. Drew will then begin to hand him some of the tools that he will need to begin the task. And the first items are the guide studs that I mentioned earlier. These guide studs will be installed as you see there, and you can also see the grid that is over the black cover plate. So that grid will need to be removed, and this is the crew then using the grid cutter I showed you. Again, it will be installed, and as the crew drives each of the individual bolts, the grid will be able to be removed, and the entire thing will be removed as one assembly. Again, the grid cutter traps the removed part of the grid. Now you see John doing the initial releasing of the torque on each of the fasteners, again to make sure that when we come back later, none of the fastener heads are stripped out. Once that's performed, then he'll install the fastener capture plate that I showed you. Again, this will trap all of the fasteners between itself and that black cover plate that we'll be removing. Again, depending on the access, he'll either manually release some of the fasteners or use the mini power tool. The issue is really that strut in the upper right-hand corner of the video that you see. It does not help us for sure on accessing some of these fasteners. Once all of the fasteners are released, then the crew will remove the entire assembly, and now you can see that the 4 cards are accessed. First, you'll have to release some card locks on each of the cards. This item is called the wishbone, and it will be what the crew uses to mount the card extraction tool onto. Again, this is the indexing one. He starts by setting it to the number 1 position, closes the jaws around it, and then he'll drive the elevator drive blocks, which will pull the card out from its location. And then this will be repeated for all 4 of the cards. As each individual card is removed, they will be put into the enclosure that you see there. As John is working on this, Megan will be taking Drew over to the lope, which is the large ORU protective enclosure. Drew will open up the lid and retrieve the 2 items that I mentioned earlier. The first one is the CEBR. This is the replacement box that has, the first one he'll grab is the LVPSR, the low voltage power supply that you see him grabbing there. The second one is the CEBR, which is the replacement box that has the 4 cards already positioned in it. He'll first hand the box with the cards to John, and then John will install it on the same location that the old 4 cards came from. And then he'll hand off the new power supply, and John will install that onto the handrail that is on the ACS instrument itself. Once that's installed, the crew will route all of the cables, and that will complete the repair of the ACS task. Then at this point, the crew will clean up the payload bay, ingress, and that'll be the end of EVA 3.